So in the last video, we kind of just went through some of the navigational basics really. We created a user and we connected to a couple of little databases, and we just had a bit of a tour around the tool, looked at setting up some data pools and bits and pieces. Just some general good housekeeping. I'd always make sure those two guys are ticked. And we also want to make sure that we've got the right data source and data target. If you've got lots of databases you're connected to here, as you click these, they will always hop to the top, so it can throw you off a little bit. So this video is really going to be around data profiling and just kind of the initial project kind of setup. This was just to give you an example of kind of what we're doing. What I would suggest is that we delete these data groups and sets because there's nothing really in there at the moment. And what I do is I create data groups for each kind of area. So I'm going to create one for data subsetting. Always make sure it's on demand, and this one I'm going to set to have a type of GT subset. That basically means I can save my data extracts here. Pretty helpful, just a nice way of keeping everything nice and tidy. I won't create a data set for that. That's just going to be a holding pen or area for me. I'm going to create some data cloning, like so, and again, and I'll leave that like so. We've got our data generation, and the last one is going to be test matching. So these are kind of the core groups that we're going to go through and build up some tasks for. Data masking is held under transformation maps, and the data profiling piece, quite often as part of an exercise I will create a data profiling pool, but that's just kind of to highlight the fact that we've done it, because often the work of data profiling kind of goes under the radar a little bit, and it's sort of missed because it's a lot of the information is stored inside the tool and it just shows and pops up to you at various points. So data profiling, first of all, we want to profile our travel database, and data profiling really is the art of figuring out what's going on in terms of our database. And there's some pretty simple stuff you can do, but some very helpful things. So for example, if we right mouse click on this little tables up here and count all the rows and count and tag, it'll just show me at a pretty high level where my data is, what I've got, what's empty, what's not. Now the data's kind of spread out quite a lot around our travel database, but it's pretty tiny in terms of volume. If we were to face this sort of database at a customer site where there's under 4,000 records as the biggest table, data subsetting certainly isn't something you would do. We subset tables that are typically 100,000, million plus rows, that sort of stuff, because that's so small, and to move this sort of data around is very performant, so we don't really need to. But in tagging it, it has started to group and just tell us about our table set. So we've got 53 tables, but we also know that we've got a set of empty tables, some with not much stuff in, and what our largest tables are. And the stupid fact is that often the largest tables, unless they're logs or audits, are that way because that's where the most traffic comes through in the system, and you're going to have to deal with them in some regard. I was recently at a customer site, and they were pretty terrified of their application because they had 4,696 or 98 tables, and they didn't want to do any reverse engineering and that sort of stuff. Actually, 3,500 of them were empty. So they reduced the size of their technical debt by 75% plus because they could just focus on the 1,000. And actually, in the groupings, they had 4 major tables and about 20 kind of relatively important, it's not the right word, but just tables to kind of go through. So one good thing that I didn't want to leave that view actually. So one of the other things that we can do that's often quite helpful, and I will typically do this at the start of any engagement, is if depending on the amount of tables, I will just open them up in GT Diagrammer. So Diagrammer is one of our kind of modeling tools around just showing database structures. When you first come across a database, I think this database is actually relatively well named. It's got, as you can see by this kind of picture here, it's got reference integrity. You can figure out where your orphan tables are, what your kind of major players are in terms of what's linking to what in your foreign keys and all that sort of stuff. If you first pick up a new database and you don't know anything about it, this is a really nice way of just being able to figure out what on earth is going on, what tables are important, the naming structures and conventions and that sort of stuff. Typically, if you have a database that's structured in this form, you don't really need to do any reverse engineering. You know where the tool knows where the primary keys and foreign keys are, and you can therefore work from this model essentially to build any extracts so they load in the right order and all that sort of stuff. You have to be a little bit careful with these orphan tables that don't have relationships, and potentially do a bit of work there to kind of figure out what those relationships are. Now, again, we talk to our customers about our profiling and reverse engineering capabilities and that sort of stuff. The tool is an accelerator to help you kind of understand your data model and any technical debt that you've got associated to it. It does also help, you could save this sort of stuff. There's some pretty cool things actually you can do in GT Diagrammer. So I will make a quick 5-minute video just on the Diagrammer as a separate feature. So if you're interested, go have a look at that video. For the moment, I'm just going to close this one down. So when it actually comes to building relationships, it's really important. So data integrity is one of the biggest things in terms of test data management that we deal in. It's also one of our strongest parts of the solution because of the repository database that we have sitting in the background. The first thing that we kind of need to do with any profiling, and profiling is kind of split up, I think, into 3 core sections. Registration, very important, essentially saying, look, I want to register these tables from my source or my target environment, and I want to go and load these into my project. This essentially is taking all of the metadata, it's taking all of the underlying information that's associated with these tables, and it's putting it into our project. Now, typically you don't register everything. Maybe you do to start with as a bit of a learning exercise, so to learn yourself, but from the tool's perspective, you typically just want to register things you want to work with or potential tables that are important to you. In this case, I'm just going to register everything and teach you some bad habits. The reason being that if we kind of go and do this with the profiling, the fact we haven't got much data, it's not a big problem. One of the biggest pluses of the registration and working in projects means that we can do this across multiple databases. So I've just got SQL environments on here, but I could register tables from Oracle, from DB2, from SQL Server, some flat files, and actually just build up like a data estate so I know what's going on. And that can be really helpful when people are saying we need to manage cross-database referential integrities and that sort of stuff. It gives us some tags in terms of registering, so it's trying to figure out what's related, what's not. This is a little bit of a myth at the moment because I actually registered from my Travel E environment rather than from my data source. You'll notice that it will, if I come and do this again, it will now pick up all the information from my data source, and it's doing a bit of a comparison between the two. So I am obviously working with 2 different databases here. Now, data source typically is something that you wouldn't have access to be able to load data into. You just extract from it and then go and push into somewhere else. But the data source has got a lot of foreign keys that my data target doesn't have. So when it's showing that they're all unrelated, it's because there are no foreign keys in that database. So if I actually register from my data source, it will keep those and maintain those for me, but not actually put them into a database or into my physical residing database. So all of that information is just stored inside the tool's kind of knowledge of, hey, I know that there is a relationship here. It's not enforced in the database, but I'm going to enforce it because I know that the application requires it to work that way. These tags will grow, these tags that you see on this side. So now we can look at what's unrelated, what's related, what parents, what children, what's got less than 5K, basically everything, and what is empty. So even in this relatively small example, I've got 39 tables that have got stuff in. I've got 14 that haven't. So I can just knock those 14 off and just kind of ignore them essentially. But that's basically what I'm going to do. So once we've registered, that's the first step you have to do in terms of data profiling. The second thing that we really want to do is potentially look at the table relationship side or the PII side, and it's now just down to whatever is interesting or they're actually trying to do. So if I click on sample table data, this will scan through for what the tool deems as PII. Select the tables first. You can click all tables, all files, all cubes. So if you've got stuff pre-built, it will just auto-select for you. And we're going to click sample. Now we're going to sample from our source connection. You could sample from your target if you wanted to. We're going to scan everything. If you've got over 10,000, 100,000, a million rows, I'd suggest putting some limits in, otherwise you could be here for a very, very long time. It's going to scan for some mathematical information. It's going to scan for things like names, addresses, postcodes, etc., etc. And you can build those out as scripts if you want to just go and run the scripts. They'll export it as CSVs, and you can load them back into the tool. You would do that if you've got a huge database that you want to scan a huge amount of stuff through. This is certainly not the most performant part of the tooling, but it's something a lot of our customers are really interested in. Things like the GDPR, just typical data knowledge and understanding where PII is very important. Click OK, and that's just going to run through. Now you'll see as it goes, it's giving us again the table count side of things, scanning 100%. If we put those limits in, you'd see, what the scan limits are, and so on and so forth. And essentially on the right hand side, after we give it a refresh and this is done, we'll have a set of new tags. Now this is not perfect, and we would never kind of claim it to a customer to be, but it is, as I mentioned, an accelerator. It's a way of just starting to learn about your system and see what's going on. It's also really good for storing some key values to reuse the data in data generation and again accelerate that process. What I would say about TDM is there's a lot of sort of semi-hidden functionality. So for example, if we go to, we'll generate some people at some point, so make sure you do this. This might save you a bit of time. Come and find, what am I actually looking for? My people table. People. I would, if you do the drop down list, it will show you some lists of names. So check a few of these. So line of business, email, home phone. Don't know if all of these have data in. Some of them do. So you see it's scanned 100%. It's giving us our data types. It's giving us, so this anything that you see with zeros basically is full of data. These guys are fully null. We've got some distinct counts. Distinct values are actually a very interesting way of trying to identify personalized information. So doing distinct counts on certain columns is a really clever way of trying to spot things that could potentially lead back to a person. And there's a subtle nuance to kind of doing this. In the bottom right hand corner, you want to click on this little save button, little kind of semi hidden down here, and you can save things as default values or list of values. I'll save them as list of values, and it's going to go and save those, and I'm going to put them in both with references to development and production. So essentially it's going to save these as things that I can use later on to generate from. I think if this piece could certainly be improved in terms of how we do it, but for the moment it's a pretty quick way of just being able to know that you're getting kind of realistic names, realistic email addresses, and so on and so forth. And that goes in. Marvelous. The third and kind of final piece of data profiling, really, if I just give this a refresh, by the way, on the right side you'll now see these tags. So this is kind of where it thinks it's found things. So for example, it thinks it's found address details in people. If we go and open up the people table, people table, there we go, and go and click that, it's saying that it's found this table, this column within there called address. Makes sense, right? This is not by any means perfect. So for example, if we go to credit card and frequent flyer miles, I wonder, so that's picked up a program member ID. It's probably in a similar format. It's probably 15, 16 characters long, something like that, and that's why it's picked that up. So it's kind of pointing you to have a look and then validate whether actually inside that, yeah, we do take a credit card. Oh my God, we're in trouble. So on and so forth. So things to kind of help us out, but we are reliant on people learning, on subject matter experts and that sort of stuff. So the final piece of the puzzle is table relationships. So we talk to customers a lot about table relationships and how we handle referential integrities across systems and that sort of stuff. Often we work with rules-based applications and databases, so there are no foreign keys. In fact, TDM if you go into the repository database in the background, there are no foreign key links. We are a rules-based application ourselves. So it relies a lot on people's knowledge of the system to be able to say, hey, if you're masking data in airports, you need to make sure you match it up with airlines, aircraft, and also in cities, because we've got some integrity there. What we do is we enforce our own referential integrity by either building it inside the tool and going through a bit of a handcraft method of doing it, by searching for potential relationships and validating them, or by kind of importing from CSV files existing kind of relationships that we've found. So the handcraft method, pretty straightforward. Right mouse click, we go and add a relationship. We go and choose where we want to go, so between airports and cities, and then we go and choose our city code and our city ID. I don't know, whatever. That then becomes a relationship. Unfortunately, I haven't got, this sounds really stupid, but I haven't got a delete button, so I can't delete that other one. So let's just add another one. You can add as many of these as you like, and that will then go and enforce a fictitious relationship inside our project. So we've not actually loaded that inside the tool, inside the database, but we have loaded it for us. So these little guys that we actually see here are the ones that we went and created, basically. So 2 foreign keys to airports. You can set various cardinality types, and feel free to kind of go and do all that sort of stuff to get one-to-many and type relationships and so on and so forth. There is an accelerator. The accelerator will essentially generate relationships for, excuse me, you've got to choose your tables as ever. It will essentially try and find relationships for you. So inside my access controls, it's found an ID and an ID, and therefore it's suggesting that that's potentially a relationship. Most of these have got IDs in, so therefore not particularly ideal. Potentially they are all relationships, but we don't really know. And as we go through this, you'll find some that potentially code, hotel chains, airlines. It's the sort of things that you'd have to validate with an end user to make sure it's right. What you could do, or what you can do, is you can just accept all of these and give it a try. But if it goes wrong, you've got to go and delete them all, and it's easier just to try and get it right, or as close to right in the first attempt as possible. So I'm going to click cancel there. What you can do inside this naming parameters is, if you're not getting any matches, you can match on kind of without the first part, without the second part of names, and so on and so forth. You do need a primary key column inside a table for this to work. And this has helped me out a lot at customer sites. It can be infuriating at times, but it certainly is a quicker way of starting to build out relationships. What you can also do is you can build reports. So if we report on relationships for tables or for registered tables, it will go and tell me, for my access controls, I've got a people ID linking to my people table and that sort of stuff. So it does tell you what's going on. You can also check relationships. So I'm just going to go and build some SQL. What this will do is, let's go and save it into our repository. And up at the top here, we can go to Manage Save SQL and have a look. So this is just one of the queries it's doing to try and validate my relationship to my city code that I just built. If I run that and I get some data back, brilliant. It's going to show me that that's a valid relationship. If I don't get some data back, then it's a load of rubbish, basically. And it is it's a much quicker way than trying to hand script it, and it just gives you an idea of how close you are in terms of your data relationships. Now, one very important metric: just because no data exists doesn't mean there's not a relationship there. It just potentially means the application hasn't been used for that sort of functionality or that sort of stuff. So that's the data profiling side of things. So we registered, we've done some PII scanning, we've done some table relationships. We've also had a little look at the GT diagrammer. It's that no matter what engagement you go on, typically that's something that you would kind of go through the process of doing just to give the tool some information and start to learn about what's going on.